Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Terrible Leader, where real leaders share the raw truth about the lessons they learned the hard way, so you don't have to. Join our host, Layci Nelson, founder of Transcend Leadership Collective and former terrible leader. Every leader can become worthy of being followed if they are willing to put in the work. On this podcast, we share the messy stories and behind-the-scenes reality of what the work actually entails. We welcome you to this community of revolutionary leaders who believe honest communication, healthy conflict, and building cultures of acceptance, respect, and trust are not only possible, but non-negotiable for cultivating world-class teams.
Hello, and welcome back to Confessions of a Terrible Leader. I'm your host and former terrible leader, Layci Nelson. We are on the third of a 5-episode series on how do you know you're getting your money's worth when it comes to investing in leadership development for emerging leaders in your organization. What are the things to look for, and what are the components that need to be in place? And if you are doing the mentoring, what are the things you need to be touching on to make sure that you really are doing right by them? If they have come to you and asked for your mentorship, or if you've identified them as an emerging leader in your organization, are you giving them the skills they need to actually succeed? Are you having those mentoring conversations that are going to serve them well, and in return serve you well and serve your organization well? So today we'll be touching on the most important skill for anyone in a position of leadership to have. This is absolutely foundational. Good news is you can learn it. All of us have to learn it. It is the ability to self-regulate. You may think, wait, what? How is that the most important? Why is that so important? Because it is where all of our actions, our thoughts stem from, is our ability to have the self-awareness and the skill set to know when we are what the conscious leadership group calls above or below the line. What does that mean? Let me break it down for you very simply. When we are in a nice, calm, regulated state, when our frontal cortex is fully engaged and we're not in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode, life is clicking along, things feel good, our bodies feel good. When we are in that state, that is where we are able to collaborate, to problem solve, to engage and connect with others. It is where we need to be able to lead in a way that's worthy of being followed. What the truth is that all of us will at some point, at least, usually it's at least once a day, honestly, even when you get good at this stuff, you will get knocked below the line of regulation. When you get knocked below the line of self-regulation and you go into a dysregulated state, let me explain what happens in your brain. What happens in your brain is that your frontal cortex, where all of those positive abilities I just spoke to live, that shuts down. They've done scans, like literally it goes from lit up to gray, shuts down. And your lizard brain, that part of our brain that we should thank for keeping us alive, does its job and floods us with hormones, kicks us into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, or some combination. And we then lose the ability to collaborate, to connect with people, to problem solve. We go into self-defense, to protective mode. And we're doing exactly what we were designed to do. Because our ancestors, we're here because they stayed alive. And they listened to that part of the brain that said run, that said be afraid, be alert, pay attention. Don't spend any extra time daydreaming. You need to stay focused on survival. Thank you, ancestors. We're here because you kept us alive. You got us here. However, what's really fascinating is our bodies cannot tell the difference. Our brains cannot tell the difference between a perceived threat and an actual, you're going to get eaten by a tiger threat. It releases the same amount of hormones. We have the same cortisol response in our bodies, and it shuts down our brain. So I don't know if it releases the same amount of hormones. It releases the same hormones, and it shuts down that ability in our brain to have that connection, that collaboration, that problem solving. That is everything. Heart first leadership, foundations to leading well, that part of your brain that can do those things is not at play if you are living in a constant reactive state. So self-regulation, or the ability to regulate and understand when you become dysregulated, is key to being able to have the skill set and the awareness to understand when you should be making decisions and when you shouldn't. And to know how to get yourself back into a regulated state. There's some things that we can do that can bring us back to that state when we've left the building, when the frontal cortex is like, bye, and we are in need of getting back there. So this is just such a critical skill. Most leadership curriculums do not teach this. And it is, for some people, when we go in, they are 60 years old, and this is the first time they've ever learned this in their life. And it is an absolute game changer for them. Let's teach it to our emerging leaders as soon as we absolutely can. I think you should teach it to everyone. Everyone needs to know this. It's such an important piece of understanding how to manage your mind, how to keep yourself out of a reactive state, and be able to, if you do dip there, recognize it. Another way to think about it is, what does this look like at work? We're not being chased by tigers, thankfully, unless we're zookeepers, maybe. But we are put in situations all the time where our egos get threatened, when our sense of worth or identity, or if you've ever been in a meeting and you're sitting around the table discussing something and it becomes evident that there's been a misstep or a problem or something isn't working in a department or with a project, the person that's work is being questioned often will just immediately drop into defensive mode. They drop down below the line. They become reactive. They're feeling like they have to protect themselves, protect their worth, prove that they belong here. And their ability to engage in the conversation is just gone. People need to know when they're doing that so they can then recognize it and reset. Doesn't mean that the problems are going to magically be solved, but you get back in a space where you can remember and recognize, oh, it's me and you versus the problem. I'm not the problem. Or if you're a person that's frustrated with someone and that drops you below, they're not the problem. One of the ways that Brené Brown talks about this is armoring up. When we feel threatened, when we feel questioned, when we feel our worth and our sometimes as deep as like identity is on the line with our work, we go into this state where we start acting in ways where we're not proud of ourselves. We don't know. We're like, why am I saying this? Have you ever had almost an out-of-body experience when you're mad or when you're frustrated in a meeting setting and you find yourself like either going hyper defensive or getting angry or saying things that you know you're going to have to walk back later, and you're almost watching yourself do it. You're like, what is happening? You're in that state where you are now reactive and you are, instead of being responsive, able to stay engaged. You've disconnected. You've dropped below the line. Helping people understand that it happens, identify when it happens, and then know what to do when they're down there to get themselves back above the line so they don't have to live in that state is huge. It's the beginning of understanding how to manage your mind, how to stop some of those thoughts that are just self-destructive and sabotaging thoughts, to grab a hold of them before they start creating your emotions. Our thoughts are what create our emotions. So this is such an important piece. Please, please, please make sure you're taking the time to work with with emerging leaders, young or old, young, no matter what phase of physical age they're in. If they are new to a position of leadership, they should definitely be spending time with you in that mentoring, in those conversations, understanding self-regulation, how it works, what it looks like when they're dysregulated, and what they can do to return to a regulated state to flip back on that frontal cortex. So there you have it. That is key. Quality, solid leaders that are changing the world can do this. They all can. I've yet to meet one who's making massive change who doesn't have this skill dialed in. So work on it for yourself and help those emerging leaders understand how they need to work on it and how they can work on it as well. It's a practice. Kind of like yoga. We just practice it over and over and over. Poses get a little easier, but it never gets super easy. You got to stay with it. So keep at it. It gets more familiar. And as it gets more familiar, your body remembers what to do when you recognize that you're there. And it gets a lot faster to return to a regulated state. So until next time, friends, go manage like a leader.
Thanks for being part of this community of revolutionary leaders who believe honest communication, healthy conflict, and building cultures of acceptance, respect, and trust are not only possible, but non-negotiable for cultivating world-class teams. If you are in the early stages of leadership, or you are currently in a leadership position and are supervising rising leaders within your organization, you are going to want to learn more about our virtual live community created specifically for emerging leaders. Our first virtual cohort begins on April 2nd, and remember, this is a live virtual community, so you can sign up from anywhere. You will be connecting with other heart-first leadership-minded individuals and learning together. Sign up for our free newsletter, the link is in the show notes, to be the first to know when registration goes live and receive first access. Confessions of a Terrible Leader is hosted by Layci Nelson and produced by Mary Scott. Music is by Leif Olson and Mary Scott from the band The Number of Months. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, go manage like a leader.